Hey, Flexy Not Bendy number 5. We're going to just stick with the hamstrings for a few more posts, and that has its upsides. Then we get to really focus on one area of the body before we move on, and the hamstring is a major muscle that often feels tight anyway. So we'll stick with the hamstrings, and once again, we're just going to use the wall. You might want an optional tool, which would just be an elevation, a low elevation in front of you, so a step stool, the exercise bench, anything like that. And that's it. All right, so we'll take it to the wall. One thing I won't let you get away from is the hip hinge. Okay, so this is a hip hinge forward bend. Now, I'm intentionally inserting this now before we do a more traditional looking forward bend, because we have done, for example, the PNF style of stretching for hamstrings. We have done a dynamic stretch. Now we are going into a more active stretch before we go into a static stretch, because when we're holding a static stretch, that means, we're holding it for a longer period of time. We want to make sure our setup is correct. And oftentimes when we feel tight in the hamstring, it's not really the hamstrings, it's our hip position. Okay, and our hip mobility. So the hip hinge is going to help drill that in, and you're going to learn the pancake concept and be able to carry that into any other variation of a forward bend, whether you're doing it sitting down or standing up. Okay, so let's take it to the wall. We're just going to start about 8 to 10 inches away from the wall. In this case, because I know I've done the hinge and I've done the wall hinge before, in this case, the wall is not a tactile cue only. It's actually our tool. And so what we get to do is we do get to lean our butt against it a little bit. So 5 to 10 inches away from the wall. You could adjust it once you figure out what's good for you. Your feet are going to be wider than shoulder width apart, so fairly wide. Okay, I would say toes forward. Okay, now we're going to hinge. Of course, the hinge, go ahead and use this crease as your marker. We are going to have the soft knee to begin. Take the hips straight back. Okay, you are going to feel, so I think it was in I don't know, a couple posts ago, we're doing the hip mobility. I mentioned that posterior tuck of the pelvis and then the anterior. In this case, you're going to be more in an anterior pelvic position, and you're going to retain that slight arch in the lower back. That is absolutely what we want here. We don't want that overarch. Okay, we don't want the gut sticking out and gut being let go, but we do want to push the hips back. Keep that small lower curve, but head to tailbone in alignment. Okay, so it doesn't quite matter, for example, if I shoot back a little bit closer to the wall and then I hinge. Now my spine angle is a little bit different than if I come off the wall a little bit more and then hinge. Okay, my head to tailbone is still neutral. Okay, that's a big key concept. All right, so from here, notice as I went back, depending especially on how far I am away from the wall, I do have the knees that bend with it. Okay, so the knees bend as a result of the position of the hip and the feet, not because you just bent it. All right, so here we go. Now from here, this part is the same as I've shown before. We don't want to just reach for the floor. We want to purposely follow the hands sliding down your thighs, sliding down your shin. Of course, stop wherever is your end range. But in this new position, of course, you should be able to go down further than you would without the with a straight leg. All right, so let's say you find your in range here. That's fine. We're doing this as more of an active stretch. We're going to hold it for 3 to 10 seconds. And then when you come up to release, slide the hands back. Don't just pop off the wall like this, okay? Slide the hands back to find yourself back up in this resting position. If you want to completely reset once you're at top of that hinge, then stand up, that's fine. If you want to stay at the hinge and just have that be a reset, that's fine. All right, but now, this is how we progress. I'll show you a regression at the end. So this is how we would progress, and this is why this hip hinge is so important. All right, if you were to test your hip hinge, and the wall kind of makes it inevitable, which is why we use it, but if you were to put like a pen or a chopstick, something, you know, small in here, in that crease, look what I have in front. This is just a little, one of those Nerf gun bullets. The cats love to chew on this, okay? They're fine, they're not, they're thriving. All right, okay. If you were to have that in that crease to test, okay, one thing you would know is that with that proper hinge, okay, so I'm gonna adjust as needed, with that proper hinge, that is trapped inside that crease. Now, as you get lower and lower, what you should focus on is the clamping down of that hinge more and more and more. So let's say you could touch the top of the feet. Let's say you could touch the floor. Let's say your hands could go all the way down full flat on the floor. If you feel that your lower back or your back starts to round, then that's too much. Now let's say you could go even further down. First thing you want to do is start using the weight of your head, very much like a ragdoll stretch, to assist with that gravity and weight. And if you could do further than that, then you would try to bring the elbows down to the floor, okay, however much. Now, once we start progressing from here, the reason why we keep focusing on this crease and this clamping down on the hinge is that to progress this, we would then have the hips come off the wall, okay, and be more in line with the back of the heel. We would then progress by straightening the leg. We would then progress by being able to bring the feet together. Now at any point, if you feel like you've loosened up on that clamp, you've lost it. All right, that means you need to go regress a little bit. And what would eventually happen once you start following this path is that this clamp here becomes so tight, okay? That's what I refer to as the pancake. Maybe that wasn't the right term, but we would fold over into that pike position using this crease as our guiding point, okay? That's why this hip hinge is so important, okay? It's got so many carryovers. All right, if you need to regress it, okay? Oh, and also when you're using the gravity and the weight of your upper body to assist, you could go ahead and not only hang your head down, but grab onto your elbows, okay, and give yourself that natural pull, all right? But again, this is going to, if you find that it releases your hip hinge a little bit, or you start rounding at the spine, okay, then don't do that. All right, or regress, you know, and work up to that. Okay, so this one is just a tool, some sort of an elevation tool, so that if you find that you can't go, say, like past your knees, then just go ahead and rest your palms right here, and you could just use this as leverage to just drop the elbows down and come up and just make it more dynamic, okay? Now practice with the different depth of the knees, the different depth of the hip hinge, how far you come up away from the wall, using all the different little cues that I gave you. All right. That's a lot to think about if you're not familiar with hip hinging, if you're not familiar with pikes and, you know, all of that. So if you're not, you don't have to worry about it. Just try your best as long as you feel it, and then as long as you're paying attention to what is happening at the hips and at your back, especially your mid to upper back, as you play around with these positions. That's the starting point. And all the while, as long as you're feeling this sort of active stretch, so your hamstrings feel like they're both engaged as well as stretching, you're doing it right. Okay, so this one, like I think I mentioned, we do use it as more of an active stretch. So hold it for 3 to 10 seconds and release, and then do it about 8 to 10 times. And you do that as many times as you want. And this could also be used as a mobility warm-up. It could also be used at the end of a workout. It could also be done as a stand alone. All right, give it a go.